brutal crackdown on its own people. COVID cases surge, China unleashes terror. Chinese citizens rebel. Economy slides, unemployment peaks. China COVID, viral chaos. It is a country that boasted of bringing the COVID situation under control, readying gigantic state-of-the-art hospitals in a matter of days when the pandemic first broke out 3 years ago, of rolling out vaccines. But it also is a country that lied through its teeth about the worsening COVID crisis, fudged numbers about deaths in its own country, and worst, misled the world about the origins of the novel coronavirus in its own backyard. We're talking about China, and this special broadcast focuses on the COVID-19 mess that China has found itself in. I'm Sneha Moldani, and our first report is about China reporting the first death in Beijing due to COVID-19 in 6 months now. Mayhem has been unleashed by the Chinese government on its own people. The country has the world's strictest COVID policy, a flawed zero COVID policy, and continues to struggle even 3 years after first cases of the infection first surfaced here. A QR code to use public facilities, go to office, school, eat in a public place, work as a construction worker, a QR code to breathe. This is how strict things are in China. Panic if a person's QR code next to you is red. Lockdown's a way of life. Even 3 years after the outbreak, as Beijing reported its first death due to COVID in 6 months, sending the country into a tizzy once again. China's prolonged zero COVID policy, scientifically flawed and inhuman, has led to widespread anger. A journalist from Straits Times explained in a tweet how tough things were vis-a-vis quarantine. These pictures speak volumes of how difficult life is for people living in China right now. It is indicative of the fact that the government is hell-bent on implementing an impractical zero COVID policy which has a negative fallout on the economy of China, as is evident. China is reporting about 35,000 new cases on an average, and this is not an underestimate given the brutality with which testing is done. Beijing has shut parks and museums, also schools. China has the world's strictest lockdowns, and the country continues to be in doldrums. Rising unemployment, an economy on a downward spiral, and a disgruntled population. President Xi Jinping has been chosen again as the leader of his people, but it is the people who are at the receiving end of the government's policy of optimizing their COVID response. Clearly, there is no respite in sight. In New Delhi, Sneha Moldani for India Today. A look now at strict lockdown measures in China. In Chongqing, Chinese citizens are fighting back and rebelling against the government's brutal measures to eradicate COVID-19.
With COVID cases on the rise, China is enforcing stringent lockdown measures. The Chinese citizens have called it inhuman, cruel and unnecessary use of brute force. Law enforcement, also called the Big Whites for the hazmat suits they wear, has taken to the streets, beating and thrashing people for violating the lockdown. In Guangzhou, police used sticks and shields to break stalls at a flea market. Across China, 31,444 cases have been reported on Friday, which was the highest for a day during the pandemic. The Chinese capital has shut down selected parts of the city after cases in single digits were reported there. The tightening came after the Communist Party this month announced measures to reduce disruptions by shortening quarantines and making other changes. The people are fighting back. In the city of Chongqing, residents used their cars to block roads to stop the lockdown enforcement from taking them into forced quarantines. COVID norms are also back at China's airports.
At present, we have one person responsible for scanning codes and another responsible for taking samples at each test desk. Under normal circumstances, we can test 300 people every hour. At present, the number of PCR tests can reach 50,000 to 100,000 people a day.
The uproar in China is close on the heels of the Foxconn riots over stopping of paychecks and workers' complaints about being forced to share living space with colleagues who have tested positive for COVID-19. Bureau Report, India Today.
The country's iPhone plant is seeing unrest. Asian markets are jittery. China's GDP is sliding. The world's second largest economy is giving the region the jitters as its people continue to battle unemployment and an inhuman COVID-19 policy of the government.
The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index dropped continuously ever since the Foxconn protest escalated and retreated a large chunk of gains accrued by Chinese companies in the last 2 months. Bloomberg estimates that its original estimation of 5.7% GDP growth for China in 2023 could come down to 2.1% if COVID restrictions continue, and other factors like increasing debt and reducing realty prices continue. The spree of layoffs has also hit China and Chinese companies hard. The latest firm to be impacted is Tencent, which is one of the highest grossing multimedia companies in the world. 3 out of 6 business units are seeing layoffs. China's production of iPhone 14 may see a massive shortfall, with the Guangzhou plant protest threatening to trigger a nationwide rally against inhuman working conditions and CCP's zero COVID policy. For November alone, the dip in production may be close to 35% from the plant. It is reported that Foxconn has offered to pay newly recruited workers 10,000 yuan to quit and leave the world's largest iPhone assembly factory in an attempt to quell protest for now. The effects of investor anxiety are far-reaching. The Nasdaq closed lower on Friday with pressure from Apple Inc. in a subdued holiday-shortened trading session for Wall Street as investors watched Black Friday sales and COVID-19 cases in China. The value of Apple stocks fell by 2%, with the number of shipments from China most certainly going to be impacted by the recent protest.
If the citizens and workers in China continue voicing out their opinions and protesting for the same as how people in real democracies do, then it is certainly not going to be easy sailing for the CCP and Xi Jinping to rebound their economy as expected before.
With Xian and Wuhan, Bureau Report, India Today.
109 days. That is the period for which residents in the ill-fated building that went up in flames were locked down. 10 people were killed in the fire because the authorities would not open up the building as part of its zero COVID-19 policy, and because of the continuous lockdown for the last so many days, none of the cars parked in front of the residential building was operated. As a result, it took a lot of effort for the fire brigade to clear the cars and reach the building. Trapped residents had to pay a price with their lives. Take a look at this report.
Flames spread upward from the 15th floor to the 17th floor, with smoke billowing up the 21st floor. According to multiple state media reports, the blaze took about 3 hours to extinguish. It is also said the fire trucks did not even enter the compound of the building owing to COVID lockdown rules, and hence most of the water spraying was of no use. Even though Urumqi has not seen a high number of cases, local officials fearful of losing their jobs are leaning towards more extreme measures such as sealing of buildings to prevent newer outbreaks in their jurisdictions. The region has been under lockdown for close to 3 months. Survivors say that people were not allowed to step outside of the building. In a rare case of occurrence, the Uyghurs and the Han ethnicity citizens protested together against such extended lockdowns and shouted at the authorities to lift these lockdowns. The mayor of the Urumqi municipality has reportedly apologized for the incident. Pandemic-related lockdown fatigue has increasingly triggered the people of China to protest and raise their voices against the lockdown. It remains to be seen how long this current status quo continues. In New Delhi with Sneha Murdani and Xian Wuhan for India Today.
That report brings us to the end of this special broadcast. The COVID-19 situation in China continues to unravel, and trust India Today to bring you the very latest, as always, on the pandemic. Thank you for watching.